Our next speaker is Dr. Cangfu Wang, who teaches and researches in several areas: Christian ethics, process studies, Chinese thought, and religious dialogue. He graduated from Claremont School of Theology with a Ph.D. in religion, ethics, and society. His dissertation is titled Transforming Conflict, a comparison of Whitehead's beauty and Laozi's Ziran, self-so. He currently serves as a faculty member at Nanjing Union Theological Seminary. The title of Dr. Wang's paper is For Religious Pluralism, Process Readings of Lao Tzu's Tao.
Okay, thank you, Sandra. It is wonderful to be here. You may have an impression that Asian scholars is always serious on their speakings publicly, right? Which means they probably lack a sense, intensive sense of Western humor. Forgive me, you're right. I'm one of that kind of person. For sure, I'm in the process of learning of Western humor as well. Today the title of my presentation is For Religious Pluralism, Process Readings of Lao Tzu's Tao. There are considerable discussions on the affinity of the ultimate concept between process thought and Lao Tzu's thought, which is an essential piece of Taoism. Lao Tzu is one of ancient Chinese philosophers. Some also argue he is the founder of Chinese philosophy. And he is considered as the author of Tao Te Ching. Now, in Lao Tzu's thought, Tao, D-A-O or T-A-O, is the most crucial concept of the ultimate. In process thought, especially in John Cobb and David Ray Griffin understanding, the ultimate notions including creativity and a pantheistic God. Some process scholars read Lao Tzu's concept of Tao as pantheistic God. Others read it as creativity. While pantheistic God is personal and creativity is impersonal, the two process readings are contrary. In my paper, I respond to the contrary by providing an alternative process reading, Lao Tzu's Tao, both as creativity and pantheistic God. From the perspective of interreligion and intercultural dialogue, all three process readings endorse religion pluralism in a generic sense. The alternative readings complex the other two for presenting religion pluralism. So I prepare a slider. When I present my paper, you may watch this slider for my explorations. So I try to talk about each one a little more. Now I will talk a little more about two process readings of Lao Tzu's Tao, and a little more about an alternative reading of Lao Tzu's Tao, and finally I will say how they are working for religion pluralism. Let's get started. So the first reading, Tao as pantheist God, Charles Hodgson is perhaps the earliest process theologian to read Tao as pantheist God. He says that in the book, A Philosopher Speak of God, he says the Laozi's Dao is neither a classical theistic God or pantheist God. And Laozi's Dao, he says, is, I quote, at least visually favorable to a non-chocolate dipolar views of the supreme. And if we understanding, we know that Hashem's words that the dipolar views of the supreme is identifying a pantheist God. So which is, in his word, is eternal temporal consciousness, knowing and including the world. And Hashem's is aware about his claim is very disputed, and he has followed the non-strife of the spirit of Tao. Now, most of the process scholar will say, will consider this one is, is overlooked Hashem's reading. Worse, some treat it as lacking knowledge of Chinese thought. Interestingly, however, Chen Zongying, an expert on Chinese and process thought, reads Laozi Dao as profound God, which has two aspects which are mutually defined, namely transcendent immanence. Now he says that the two aspects of Dao, Yu and Wu, are similar to Whitehead's God, which has two natures. This is the first reading. The second reading, besides this reading, some process scholar read Laozi's concept of Tao as creativity. Now, Joseph A. Bracken reads Laozi's Tao as the Tao itself is pure movement and activity. And in his book, The Divine Matrix, he says the Tao never became an actuality in its own right, but instead served as a dynamic principle for the existence of things that do not exist in their own right. David Howe goes further to say that the Taoist notion of creativity is even more radical than Whitehead's, since there's nothing in the Taoist vision that functions as does the primordial nature of God, as transcendence, ordering principle, conditioning, or acts of self-creativity. And the other process scholars follow this reading as well, like Roger T. Amy, right? Like Ellen Fox, like recently Han Qitong and Yu Fu in their translation of Dao De Jing says Dao is not an object, and they interpreted Dao as endless creating and creating endlessly. Although this kind of scholars, the process scholars, interpret Laozi's Dao slightly different, but they all support read Dao as creativity. So you see that the two readings are contrary. Probably they're the contrary and the three aspects. One aspect, the with the Dao is an actual entity. The second aspect is with the Dao knows the world. The third one, with the Dao, is the ontologic measure of human goods. So the first reading will give a yes, but second reading will say no. Let us provide another reading. This is my reading. I would like to say an alternative reading of Laozi Dao as both creativity and a pantheist God. So let me explain a little more. Laozi Dao as creativity, in terms of Wu is nothing, non-being or nothingness. In the chapter 40 of the Dao De Jing, which is really interesting one, that says that the reversion is the action of Dao. Weakness is the function of Dao. And it also says that all things in the world comes from you, and you comes from Wu. So the Neo-Confucianism Wang Bi interpreted Dao as Wu. However, he does not explain what meaning of Wu. Another Neo-Daoist philosopher Guo Xiang interpreted Wu as a self-creativity of entity without relying on anything. So although Wang Bi says Dao as Wu in the Dao De Jing does not explicitly state Tao as Wu, but we can infer that if we refer the chapter 2, Tao produces 1, 1 produces 2, and 2 produces 3, we can say that Tao as Wu. Although the Tao Te Ching does not say the self-creativity depend on nothing, because the self-creativity of entity also depends on Tao. But Guxiang says no, it's on themselves. So although of that, but we can infer that the two neo-Taoism philosophers help us to point out the concept of Tao, including the meaning of creativity. But of course, this is not as only one evidence in the Tao Te Ching. There's other chapters of Tao Te Ching, especially in the Whitehead's understanding that many becomes one and one becomes many. That's also another chapters of course address of that. So that's what I'm speaking about Laozi Tao containing the meaning of creativity. But also I will read Tao, Laozi Tao as pantheistic God, or in terms of a pantheist, or in pantheistic term. The first, I wanted to respond to the three questions whether Tao is an actual entity. Absolutely, because Tao is an actual entity. In chapter 25, that says something is formed out of chaos. That's something, not as nothing, but something. Then also in chapter 21 of the Tao Te Ching is also the thing is called Tao as in vigor and in rooting. Although it's in vigor and rooting, but it's clear, says Tao is the thing. Now, of course, Tao, the thing, is not one of the mirror things. Taoist scholar Wang Zongjiang says the Tao is primordial, the highest thing. I wanted to try to say we can further clarify the relationship between the two. I will use the mutual in relationship between Tao and mirror the thing. What I say in mutual in, the in, I'm following Philip Clayton's understanding about ontological dependence, inheritance sense of the in. That's pantheism understanding. So in the Laozi, we can clearly say that Tao Te Ching, we can clearly say that Tao produced 1, produced 2. The mirror things depends on Tao. But other chapters also says, like for chapter 25, that says that Tao is formed from chaos. And Taoist scholar says that the chaos is related to the cosmic X myth. Chinese. That's very fascinating creation myth of China, in China. So that indicates there's no Tao if there's no chaos. The Tao is formed out from the chaos, and the chaos is something over there. So that means without the chaos, there's no Tao. So that's what I say. There's mutual in, mutual depends. That's what I'm saying. That's the relation between the Tao and the mirror thing. The second one, I will say, Tao, whether Tao knows the word, I will say yes. Look at the chapter 79 of the Tao Te Ching. That says, heavenly Tao has no favorites. It is always with the good man. Make no sense. If Tao does not know the good man, how can we say Tao is always with the good man? Now, recently, scholar like Li Jian also used the chapter 25, so your Godian's versions of Tao Te Ching. He says there's another is very interesting word in the different version, which is duo, mu, right? There's form that developed from a primordial chaos, duo, mu. That means joyful, alone. And one of the legendary disciples of Laozi said also clearly used the two words. That's 悦目胸中, that means joyful alone in the heart. So Li Ji argued Tao has affection and violations as well. Spanish sinologist also says, Camilo Elodi also says, but if Tao has some kind of affections or violation, why in the Tao Te Ching we cannot see that clearly? And he argues there's no evidence to argue against the personality of Tao in Tao Te Ching. But why we cannot see, he says, because of the humility of Tao. The third one I would like to say, Tao is the ontologic measure of human good. Of course, the chapter 8 of Tao Te Ching says the highest good is like water is close to Tao. Also, another chapter about, so say, use a metaphor of water to indicate the altruism, the goodness of Tao. So if we look at it deeply, we clearly understanding, like the Chen Zongyin says, the goodness inherited in Tao. So that's what I'm reading. Let us turn the last section I wanted to address. So how this three process reading connect of the religion pluralism. So my statement is that all three process reading endorse religion pluralism in the generic sense. The alternative reading complex the other two for present religion pluralism. According to David Ray Griffin, religion pluralism in the generic sense means two affirmations. One is negative, another is positive. The negative affirmation is that the rejection of the rejection of religious absolutism, which means rejecting a plural assumption that their own religion is the only one that provides saving truths and values to its adherents, that it alone is divinity inspired, that it has been divided, established as the only legitimate religion, intended to replace all others, as I quote. Now, of course, religion absolutism has two primary forms. One is religion exclusivism, another is religious inclusivism. The positive affirmation is the acceptance of the idea that there are indeed religions other than one's own that provide saving truths and values to their adherents. So I would say the first readings endorse religion pluralism in the generic sense. Now, we know that when the Haitians used the term the pantheism, or the Chen Zongyin used God for Tao, is really bold and is risky. Because in the Tao Te Ching, Shen, right, Shen is God, is nothing about the Western understanding of Shen. Shen is always about the soul. After the death of the elite, there is God. But in Laozi's thought, Laozi also understanding this Chinese traditional God, Shen. But however, the Tao is not in that type of ultimate. So if we understanding Shen different from humans, but not in kind, or even Shen different from the universe, but cannot separate from the universe. This is Chinese understanding of the ultimate of the Shen. Another one, for example, classical theism, the Western classical theism insisted that God differs from humans in kind, can exist without the universe. Pantheism, or profound God, as Chen Zongyin says, as criticism of both one. So that's why I use pantheism is establish the connection between the two different traditions. So what I used to say is really to criticize their own tradition, West tradition, but also engage with the Chinese tradition. That in the new words, that's to establish the sense of religion pluralism. For the second reading, which is very different from the first reading. But I also that the second reading also endorsed the religion pluralism in the generic sense. Because in David Ray Griffin and John Cobb's understanding, there are two outcomes. One is impersonal, another one is impersonal. So when they say Tao as creativity, they emphasize the difference between the Westernese, Chinese, and especially the Christians as well. So they wanted to emphasize the difference between the two traditions. Now, I would like to say the second one is emphasize the deep religion pluralism. The East emphasize the impersonal creativity. The West also, emphasize the personal ultimate. Now, of course, it does not like exclusivism. Exclusivism is always overlook the impersonal ultimate. But in the second reading, they were very value of the impersonal creativity because they thought the personal ultimate is chief exemplifications of creativity. So that's why they value the East tradition very well. So for me, I think I'll read 2 paragraphs of my position. So the alternative reading standing with the first 2 readings for religion pluralism. The alternative reading follows the first reading to use the phrase of pantheist God for Laozi Dao. It also stands with the second reading to use creativity for Laozi Dao. The second process reading differs from the first, but both endorse religion pluralism in the generic sense, as I announced above. Because of this fact, the alternative reading surely stands with them. The more important thing is that the alternative reading provides something that the first process readings overlooked for presenting religion pluralism. The overlooked is twofold thing. The first aspect is about the issue of multiplicity in readings of Laozi's concept of Tao. While the first reading, understanding Laozi Tao in pantheistic term, it overlooks the multiple meanings of Laozi's concept of Tao. The second reading have a similar problem in reading Laozi Tao merely as creativity. This reading probably leads a simplification of Laozi's concept of Tao. They have the advantage of introducing Laozi's concept clearly, but they may sometimes share the criticism unfaithfully. Moreover, they may lead to an impression that religion pluralism in their reading of Laozi's concept of Tao is not plural or deep enough. The second aspect of concern are the clarity problem in reading Laozi's concept of Tao. Clarity is one of the required features of any scholarship. The first and the second process reading did well for the clarity of Laozi's concept of Tao. However, things may often go oppositely, as Laozi repeatedly reminded us. In the case of Laozi's concept of Tao, too much clarity leaves no space for Laozi's word. The Tao that can be told is not eternal Tao. It may lead to another impression that religion pluralism in their readings, Laozi's concept of Tao, is not holistic enough. So for the twofold things, the outward process reading helps complete. The outward reading shows the multiple meanings, at least 2 of Laozi's concept of Tao. In other words, it does not oversimplify Laozi's concept of Tao, nor does it treat Laozi's thought simply as a non-theistic tradition, which becomes a clutch in the West for Taoism. Thus, it provides a deep views or remedy to the 2 process reading of Laozi's concept of Tao for presenting religion pluralism. The last paragraph. More, the outward reading respect clarity for interpreting Laozi's concept of Tao. Meanwhile, it leaves enough space for different creative imaginations to interpret Laozi's concept of Tao. To read Laozi Tao as both creativity and pantheist God may not have such kind of clarity in reading it as one of them. It may introduce confusions about how these 2 contrary ideas come together in one concept. However, at the alternative reading presented, a classification of the confusion may introduce religion pluralism can be holistic, which is neither this nor that, but as a whole. In short, religion pluralism present in the alternative readings underline the difference within similarity and similarity within difference, which is the soul of religion pluralism. Thank you.